Welcome to this Bismarck edition of City Current, a program designed to provide information on the issues and actions of city government and how it affects its citizens. I'm Mary Van Sickle, Executive Director at Dakota Media Access, along with Jason Timonek, Assistant City Administrator for the City of Bismarck. We are here at the studios of Dakota Media Access on May 10th, the Wednesday morning following the Bismarck City Commission meeting. So let's start with a bit of a wrap-up, Jason, about the meeting last night.
Sure.
There's always a number of issues to cover, but we'll jump into some of the highlights, I think.
Sounds good.
The first one that came to mind as I looked through the agenda and watched the meeting was the fire department, the new fire station. And I think that's a real significant addition to the city of Bismarck. So why do we need a new fire station?
Simple answer is growth. We have a number of fire stations throughout the community strategically placed in locations to offer the best response time to business owners, property owners, residents. What our fire department strives for is to be able to respond to a call within 4 minutes from when the call comes in. This new fire station, which will be located on Miriam Avenue, just east of the Bismarck Expressway, south of I-94, will actually replace the existing fire station on East Divide, which is commonly referred to as the Sleepy Hollow Station.
Now, when you talk about the new the location of the new fire station, is that near the National Guard in that area?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
It'd be just south of the Bone Armory on Miriam Avenue.
Oh, okay. I got it. And what's the timeline, Jason? What do you think this is going to start, and when do you expect to be finished?
The construction should start this summer. There's a number of steps in the process to get to the point where they're ready to pull permits and get the contractor started. But the construction will start in 17. It should be completed in 18. There's roughly a 14 to 16 month timeline to build this fire station out. But the plans would be to have it fully operational by 18.
And this is a little ahead of your schedule, isn't it?
It is,
Okay.
yes. We're anticipating more growth, primarily residential growth and some commercial growth in the northeast part of our community. We know that the developers in those areas have master plans for significant subdivisions coming forward, and this is a response to that to try and both service the existing areas of the northeast part of our community, but then also the new areas as well.
And originally scheduled for next year to be constructed, is that correct? But you moved it forward because of the construction
Correct.
bids coming in favorable?
Yes, absolutely. We have seen very favorable bid amounts these last couple of years, much different than what we'd seen in the early part of the teens. The 2013, 14, and 15 construction costs were much higher than we were used to. These last 2 years, we've seen a pretty significant drop in the contractor bids, which is wonderful for us. It's wonderful for the taxpayers because it's more efficient use of the monies that we have
Absolutely.
to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that this new fire station will take the place of the one on Divide, near Sleepy Hollow.
Correct.
Do you have any ideas about how that building will be repurposed?
Right now, we're having discussions between the fire department and the police department. For several years, we have talked about the police department's ability to have a site on the north side of town. Right now, the police department uses a small portion of the fire department on Lockport Street, just south of 43rd Avenue. They have a small office in there where the officers can go in there and do paperwork and get some other work done. The discussions now is how can we reuse the existing Sleepy Hollow station to better service the police department and their needs for response times on the north side of town. There would also be, due to the large garage bays because of the storage of the fire trucks, there may be an opportunity to store some police equipment in this building as well, which is always a benefit. Our police department is fairly hemmed in its existing location. We don't have a lot of opportunity for growth in that on that property, so we're looking at alternative locations for some of that equipment storage.
Sure. Well, keep us informed as that moves forward. Another issue, or seemed to be a big issue last night, was sewer improvement districts last night. So you had a lot of discussion on that and some large areas of Bismarck within city limits and outside of city limits that are going to go through some change.
Correct. Yeah, the storm sewer improvement districts were the discussion last night, and what we were looking at is the area kind of north central, northwest Bismarck, just west of Washington Street. This is an area of our community where we're starting to grow into some of the existing rural subdivisions, and these rural subdivisions have been in place for decades. With stormwater in rural subdivisions, they handled on their own, self-contained, natural drainage, drainage in the ditches and things like that. With urban development, we're looking at storm sewers and ponds to help capture some of that stormwater.
Sure. And the area that we're talking about specifically here is northwest Bismarck. Would be bordered on the east. Is it Washington, or does it go further east from Washington?
The entire watershed area is on both sides of Washington Street, but the vast majority of it is on the west side of Washington Street.
Primarily on the west side, and then going north from
north of 57th Avenue.
Wow.
So even north of what most people would know as Liberty Elementary. So
that's a big area.
It is.
And it's and what specifically are they going to be doing in there?
What they'll be doing is creating natural stormwater ponds to capture some of the runoff that comes off the streets, off the homes, the roofs of the homes, and things like that. We can't just let water run wherever we'd like. We have to manage that stormwater to make sure that we don't have downstream impacts for other property owners.
Sure. And the timeline for that? Do you expect that work all to be done this summer?
That is my understanding, that it will happen all this year, weather permitting, of course.
Of course. Always weather permitting around here. Another item on your agenda last night was a discussion about the wastewater treatment plant and some emergency repairs that have been necessary down there. That was kind of interesting.
Correct.
Talk about that a little
There
bit.
have been a number of improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, both in expansion to be able to handle more waste coming through, but then also as part of that expansion, there have been some emergency repairs. And as emergency indicates, we weren't anticipating these types of repairs. And it's kind of like a home improvement project. You start to see some problems, and once you fix that problem, there's another one behind it and another one behind that. So
been there, done that.
Yep, I think we all have. So this is a result of some good exploration into the wastewater treatment plant and the facilities that are on site. And what we've learned is that if we didn't make these improvements, that we would be compromising our ability to treat all the waste that is coming through that system.
So being proactive, getting on it right now.
Absolutely. Again, we have to be in compliance with EPA regulations to make sure that the water that is treated when it's put back into the river system meets all the quality standards that are in place. So this is making sure that we don't run afoul of any of the federal regulations.
And I know I'm repeating myself, but again, the timeline on this project is starting this summer?
It is. It's been ongoing. There have been improvements at the wastewater treatment plant dating back all the way to last year as far as the expansion, but these emergency repairs will be happening in a very timely fashion.
A lot going on this summer. Another project is a large street improvement district with a significant amount of space, repaving, new asphalt. A project up in northwest Bismarck.
Yes, this is part of the city's annual street maintenance program. The city has a software program and a company that we use called Dynatest. And what Dynatest does is they actually go out and drive streets through our community. And they have software and systems that can analyze the condition of the asphalt, the sub-base, the concrete. And from there, we program our street improvement districts based on the condition of the roadways. This is what we would consider routine maintenance, normal maintenance. The life cycle of this asphalt is coming to its end, so we'll need to go in and completely reconstruct some areas of the roadways, but then also a resurface. And resurfacing is often referred to as a mill and an overlay, which means the sub-base, the material below the street, is still in good condition, but the asphalt itself is failing. So
okay, and this was a large area in northwest Bismarck, 246 and a half blocks. It's a lot of people, and I noticed last night during the meeting as well that your planner mentioned how many households that was. I don't recall the number, but it was a large number of people that have been notified, and I know the city goes through this process of notification, and then residents have an opportunity to protest if they want.
correct.
Your protests were fairly low.
That is also correct. Yes. Yeah, we are required by state law to post an ad or place an ad in the local paper, the Bismarck Tribune. Our offices actually go one step beyond that, and we send direct mailings to all the property owners in those affected districts. And the intent with that is to make sure that they are getting the message. We know in today's world, not everybody gets the newspaper, not everybody's reading the small print legal ads, so we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to help educate the public and give them an opportunity to ask questions. If there are concerns with the street improvement districts, they can be protested out if the percentage of the property owners in those areas achieve that level. And we have had some districts in the past, in fact, this year, protested out. What that really means is the work won't get done this year. The property owners are not willing to help pay for those improvements, and we simply will not do the work. So
If that happens.
if the districts are protested out.
Right, but
Correct.
this is moving forward?
These are
and
moving forward. The protest percentages were less than 10% in all the areas that were identified. So to us, that gives us confidence that moving forward, we know that these streets will get repaired, we know how they will be funded, and we know that the citizens along these roadways will have brand new streets.
And this is paid for primarily through special assessments on each property?
Correct. Special assessments are based on a per square foot ratio. So the larger your lot, the more you'll pay. But also it's fair to mention that the city of Bismarck uses sales tax collections to help buy down these special assessments. And we do that as a result of just simply the cost that goes into maintenance and repair.
Absolutely.
And if we weren't able to help buy down the special assessments, it's quite likely a lot more of the districts would be protested out, and we would have streets that just don't get fixed.
Absolutely. And, they're somewhat controversial now, special
Yes.
assessments. I know that the city gets a lot of reaction from citizens because it can be a substantial amount of money for a homeowner or a business owner. I think you had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where East Main Avenue was discussed, and those property owners all kind of banded together and sent a message, which the
Correct.
city listened to. And it's somewhat controversial, but it is the funding mechanism that's in place right now. So I know that also you have a committee that's reviewing special assessments
That's
and that
correct.
whole process right now.
Yep, we have the Special Assessment Task Force, which is meeting on the first and third Monday of each month. We're meeting at 3 o'clock at the City Public Works Building, and these are public meetings. There is a committee that has been identified. It's a broad cross-section of our community, property owners, commercial property owners. We also have the member organizations represented with the Chamber of Commerce, the BMDA, the Home Builders Association, the Bismarck-Mandan Board of Realtors, and then general citizens as well. And the one nice thing about this committee, for me anyway, is that there are a high number of new faces, people I've not worked with in the past. Too many times we get committees that see some
old.
of the same faces again and again. And I'm not, no discredit to those folks, but the Special Assessment Task Force is really going to get into all the details that are associated with special assessments. So the end result would be hopefully a recommendation to the City Commission on how to move forward, perhaps how we do things differently. We will certainly be looking at all different aspects of special assessments, what's done in other communities, regionally, what's done in other states, nationwide. So at this point, everything is on the table. We don't have a clear recommendation at this point, but we wouldn't. We've got many, many meetings to go before
It's
we can get there.
complicated.
It is.
Well, we've talked about sewers, streets. Also last night at the meeting, your new engineer, not so new, Gabe, came up with, or they're recommending a new stormwater management manual.
Correct. Yeah, this is the Stormwater Design Standards Manual, and this is impactful for primarily builders and developers. We as the City of Bismarck have to regulate stormwater, and erosion control is really what we're talking about, and we want to make sure that we keep our storm sewers clean, we keep our drainage areas clean. We want to make sure that going forward, the changes that we're making are beneficial for our needs, but also not overburdensome for the developers and the home builders in our community, because these are direct changes to the way they will have to do business going forward.
It sounded like there were a number of steps that are going to be streamlined, allowing the process to move a little quicker, which should be satisfactory for most of the developers and builders in the community, but yet not at the cost of safety and
Right, and with most everything the city does, we're involving other groups. We can't make changes in a vacuum without asking how these impacts would be noticed by those other agencies. So there are mutual conversations going on between city staff and the private sector to work through these changes, knowing that we have to make changes to comply with federal regulations, but at the same time, we don't want to over-regulate their industry and compromise the way they're able to do business.
Yeah. And last but not least, there was a legislative report, the final.
The final one, yes. City Administrator Keith Hunke provided an update on the legislative action items. There were, I believe, 55 bills that we as the City of Bismarck monitored. A number of them dealt with health and safety, taxation. Not all of them ended up the way we thought they would, but that's how the legislature works sometimes. So there were some that we were satisfied with the outcome, and there were others that simply didn't really change much at all.
There were two bills in the economic development area that are going to affect how we do business specifically in the downtown area. That affect the TIF and the Renaissance Zone and some of the core programs.
Correct.
Talk about how they're going to change. What's going to be different than business as in the past?
Senate Bill 2166 is probably the most significant bill that was passed for us as far as downtown programs go. And one of the things that was a result of the changes in Senate Bill 2166 is the City of Bismarck will need to provide a letter of community support. And the definition of community support has been defined as letters of support from Burleigh County and the Bismarck Public School District.
But I thought that was already in place. Didn't you always need that support?
We've gotten that support in the past. It wasn't ever codified in the law. So it was more of a policy, and it became practice that became policy at the Department of Commerce's level. Historically, we had turned in a variety of letters of support. It wasn't just from the school district or the county, but also private business owners, private residents, Chamber of Commerce, past mayors. So we as the city interpreted community support to be a range of things, a variety of things. That definition has been much more narrowed, and it gives us direction on how we need to move forward.
Okay. Well, speaking of the Renaissance Zone, you have a meeting coming up just in a couple days on Thursday.
Correct.
And that is, again, an open meeting.
Absolutely.
You have a Renaissance Authority that reviews projects, and there's a few projects that you do have on your agenda. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that you are proposing a revision of the downtown sign ordinance, which I think is very much overdue.
Long overdue.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about what the major points in that sign ordinance revision will be?
Sure, absolutely. The changes are a result of just a changing atmosphere. If you were able to go back and look at pictures of downtown from the 1960s and 70s, it was one sign on top of another on top of another. It was almost too many signs. And as a result from that, we kind of tightened things up a little bit. And right now, the way the laws are written is really a business owner or a building is only allowed one sign per business. And that doesn't always work. Downtown, because we have so many unique spaces, because we have so many unique opportunities for retail and dining and entertainment, we need to be responsive to their needs as well. I'm not going to say that it's going to look like Times Square downtown. We'll still have regulations. There will be...
I hope not.
No. No, I don't think we want to try and emulate that at all. But we are responding to requests from the private sector as well as the sign companies in town, because they have new technologies that'll offer things that we weren't aware of or weren't able to use in the past. So going forward, you will see some changes. Primarily, this will be beneficial for the property owners and the business owners. You and I, as citizens, as pedestrians downtown, we may notice some more signs, but not a complete change from where we are. We're trying to line up our practices with the requests of the business owners to make sure that we're, again, not over regulatory.
This is a sign ordinance specifically for the downtown core. What about citywide? Is there any discussion about taking this sign ordinance and revising the citywide?
We have talked about that for a number of years, and signage, it can be a hot topic for some. In other communities, signage is regulated very heavily. And you notice that if you go to a community where you won't see what we would call a pylon sign, a sign on the top of a pole. You'll see more of a monument sign where it's a brick sign. It's an ornamental sign in the front area of the property. If you drive up and down State Street in our community, you'll see that there's a variety of signs and height limits. I think the tallest a sign can be in a commercial district, Highway 83, is 130 feet. That's a pretty tall sign.
I think State Street or Highway 83 is a good example of what not to do.
Yeah.
That's just an opinion, but
We've heard that
it
comment
looks
from
chaotic.
a lot.
It's not a very attractive roadway, and I think primarily because of the signs that exist and the inconsistency in that. I remember quite a few years ago, at least 10 years ago, we had a landscape ordinance finally drafted for the city, and what a difference that makes now in new properties being constructed, but also along State Street. I often wonder what it would look like up there without that landscaping ordinance, because that does at least add some softness and a buffer in that area that prior to that didn't have that.
Right.
And that was even worse.
And part of the landscape ordinance isn't just for beautification, but it also ties back to one of the topics we touched on earlier, and that's collection of stormwater.
Absolutely.
We have to have pervious surface areas for some of these properties to shed water, capture water, and things like that. If we allowed property owners to pave from one edge of their property to the other, we would have a lot more difficulty dealing with the stormwater than we do today.
Yeah, and I think that gets by. Most people don't realize that is the case.
Yeah, and we certainly understand that there's an added cost to the business owners when landscaping is a requirement. We try and balance that with aesthetic value and their needs as well. But I think if you look at some of the newer areas of our community, primarily the commercial areas, you'll notice those softer features, the landscaping.
Absolutely.
And once these, I'm thinking about a parking lot with trees in it versus a parking lot that doesn't have trees. In the summertime, motorists are going to look for those areas with trees so they can park in the shade or get some relief from the sun. So it's a long-term ordinance that will have lasting impacts in our community.
You say you don't really notice the landscaping. I think you notice it more when it's not there, and the bare and the hardscape that exists. It's just so much nicer.
Yep, I
So
would agree.
we talked about a lot of things. We were kind of focusing on the downtown. I just want to jump back to that. At a previous commission meeting, permission or the action of the commission was given to move forward and creating and removing the one-ways in Chancellor Square. Something that's been discussed for decades. There were numerous downtown surveys.
Yes.
Should we or shouldn't we do this?
Yeah.
And the commission has now said, yes, we need to do this. When do you expect that work to start?
I think in the very near future, our engineering department is doing some more of the study and research to see how this impacts the downtown area. And if I can just back up a little bit, for anybody that's listening that's not familiar with the term Chancellor Square, it was a pedestrian-friendly concept that was implemented in the late 70s. And if you are familiar with downtown, Chancellor Square is really the area of 4th Street, Broadway Avenue, 6th Street, and Thayer Avenue. So it's about a 2-block area downtown. For some, it's those goofy one-ways that we have downtown. But the intention was to narrow the crosswalks, increase outdoor landscaping again, seating areas. It was all intended to make downtown more pedestrian friendly. Over the years, we've taken a number of looks at this at Chancellor Square. One of the biggest challenges we have is the reconfiguration of some of the poured-in-place concrete. As you know, we've got landscape beds with trees and shrubs and flowers and things in them. If we're going to make permanent changes to the parking configurations and the drive lanes, there's a sizable dollar amount attached to that as well. So as I recall, the previous discussions on changing the Chancellor Square had to do a lot with the loss of landscaping, because those raised planters, if they're removed, will likely remove the trees. The trees will not survive. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a big step to make as a downtown area. And I think that in the past, people just said, don't want to go there. So let's try just the one-ways for now.
Yep.
I think there's another discussion coming about the whole aesthetic of downtown, curb and gutter, street repair. We've talked about this before. and landscaping, and what does the future look like. So this is a good first move, I think.
It is, and I think it kind of speaks to the city's methodical approach to some of these changes. We're not going to jump in without knowing all the facts and figures beforehand. And we also know that any changes or street improvement districts downtown can have a detrimental impact on some of the business owners. When you tear up streets downtown, of course, you limit access, you limit parking, you limit some of the conveniences that people are used to. So if we are going to be making wholesale changes to the roadways, to the parking configurations, we need to be very careful that we're working with the business owners, the Downtowners Association, to get everybody up to speed on what we're thinking.
Right, and working around the events and activities that happen during the summer. That's your construction season as well as our outdoor time, and a lot of festivals and events are happening around that time too. So the last thing on my list here is kind of a big issue that the city is dealing with, and that is the potential recall election of the mayor. And I know that city staff is right now working to verify signatures.
Correct. The petitions were turned in, I believe, April 18th. It was a Tuesday. We have 30 days from that time to verify the signatures, do our due diligence. And what we will need to ensure is that the people that have signed the petitions are residents of the city of Bismarck. You have to live within city limits. You can't live in a rural area and say it's Bismarck. You have to actually be in city limits. The other thing that we're going through is a good number of the signers, petitioners, are residents of either manufactured home parks or apartments. And that gives us a little bit higher level of difficulty to verify those addresses because we don't have that information in our systems. So we're being very respectful of the time. Obviously, we know our end date, we know when we have to be done, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are moving forward in a very deliberate method, and that we are, if we do need to hold a recall election, that it is legitimate and bona fide. If there are discrepancies in some of the signatures and we're not able to verify those, and we hold an election that may or may not have been legitimate, that would cause concern for those citizens that don't want to have a recall election, because there is a cost to this, to the city of Bismarck.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we're estimating anywhere between $40,000 and $50,000 for a one-time, one-day election.
Well, that's on top of all the city staff time that's
Correct.
been happening already, used for this. So, well, you'll keep us informed, and as we move this forward, as this moves forward, and
Absolutely.
we'll get more information when next time you come back. Maybe we'll
Certainly.
be a little more specific. So, thank you, Jason.
My pleasure.
This was great.
Thank you. This
Looking
was
forward
fun.
to the next time. And if you'd like any information on the issues that we discussed today, visit the city's website at bismarcknd.gov or call 701-355-1300. And if for future programs you'd like us to address specific issues for Bismarck or Mandan, please contact us at info@freetv.org. This program will replay periodically on KDAC FM 102.5 radio and on our government access channels 2 and 602 HD. The program will also be available as a podcast at kdacfm.org and as a viewing link at freetv.org. Until next time, thanks for watching.